My name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This is a fun one because I get to review one of my good friend's books, and also it fulfills one of my Pop Sugar Reading Challenge prompts. Always fun. So today I am reviewing In Absence by Laura Dias de Arce. This is a short story collection focusing on a variety of themes, but it is mostly horror, body horror, and dealing with grief and loss. It is also very specifically dealing with the theme of miscarriage. If you do not know, the author has recently suffered a miscarriage. I know this in depth because we are fertility struggle buddies. Congratulations on the pregnancy, by the way, Miss Diarce. I'm not jealous at all. Regardless, there is a lot of talk about it, although it is kind of like shrouded in metaphor and magical realism. So it is something to be aware of if that's something you need to avoid going into the book. But for the most part, you don't see anything in direct graphic terms like that, so you don't have to worry about that kind of exposure. But in general, I am definitely noticing a lot of trends in her short story work. I did review Monstrosity, which was her previous short story collection that also had body horror, but one of my favorite running themes in her work is women that are fed up with asshole dudes and react in a very visceral way, like body horror way. It's one of my favorites. It came up before in the previous collection with some female monsters, and they're not as monstrous this time, but there are a few, like Terry, Dolce, and Ruth, the widow Ruth, definitely. I want to be her when I get older. Can I be her? Regardless, there is a lot of talk about loss, and a lot of this gets gory. There's a lot of talk about death. Some of them were very dark in like the here is the reality of certain, let's call them societal trends, and what people face. It continues to be very focused on the Latin experience. There is a story, all about these Cuban immigrants, and going back to that country and that whole kind of thing. And because there's a lot of Latin influence, there's a lot of magical realism, and I recognize that magical realism is very important to that culture. It was a direct way to deal with the inherent absurdity that is colonialism and assuming you just get to take over the world because you think you're better. And the effect that it has on people. But here's the thing, I still don't understand magical realism well. My brain is very hyper literal, and so it's like, that's some pretty language. I bet there's a great metaphor in there, but I don't know what it is. Which I didn't take any stars off for, because I can't blame the author for the genre that I don't understand, which is why I almost never review magical realism, because I recognize that I don't understand it well. So it's just gotten to the point where if I'm confused, I don't take off stars because that's on me. But yes, a lot of metaphor, a lot of very poetic, very descriptive language of things that might on the surface seem surreal or absurd, but are meant to convey other ideas or facets that you might have an easier time than me uncovering. I did not. But the strangest part is that there were some short stories that, like, out of nowhere, were just really sweet and really heartwarming. And I was like, okay. And because it kind of was like, there's these horrific, there's parts where like children die or people get like gored apart. But then there's one where it was like a were chupacabra like has a meet cute with a were goat. So woman that turns into chupacabra meets man that turns into were goat, and they have a meet cute. And it's like, where'd that come from? Like, that one, probably one of my favorites. Just the idea of this giant chupacabra. I'm probably butchering that, chupacabra. Deciding that this goat was just cute and petting it instead of eating it. Sure, you know what? Let's go with that. Another standout, another one of my favorites, was also a subway retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice, where the underworld is just a series of underground subway tracks. I really liked the imagery with that. And again, we still have a lot of the boyfriends that aren't that great track. Like, she assures me that she does love her husband, but she also assures me that her husband's definitely not an alien and that she's definitely not in an alien romance, but I don't know that I believe that one. Anyway, I did like those little moments of levity within this, what is essentially a very dark book. There is 3 short stories that are probably the most surreal out of all of them, that take place within 3 parts of the across the entire thing. So it's like short story, other short stories, continuation of that, other short stories, and then I believe the last one is at the very end. So it kind of bookmarks it. And that's the one that deals directly with having to deal with the grief of a miscarriage. So if you recognize that vibe, you can probably even just skip over those stories that directly deal with that, if that's an issue for you. But in general, I really enjoyed it. I expected to. I've reviewed her work before, and I've loved it. I'm still waiting on that Brujas in Space story you promised me. Okay, Laura? Like, I get it. Sci-fi never sells as well as horror and fantasy, but still, regardless, I gave this book 5 stars. Highly enjoyable. You're gonna need to enjoy some elements of body horror or gore to get in on this, because there's just a lot of it in like every story. Like almost every story involves either death or some kind of grotesque transformation. You're not going to get away from it. So be sure that you're on board with that, because she doesn't hold back. And once again, if you are dealing with fertility issues or miscarriage, this book is not going to directly shove the images of that in your face, but it will dance around it with a very poetic language. So be aware of that if that's something you need to look out for. But all in all, a fantastic collection. If you're an indie author and you would like a review, something like this one, you can send me an email. I'll have all my information down in the description below. Please be sure to give my review policy a quick read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.